And I never understood why they would get defensive. And then sometimes they would just like start throwing a wall at me. And it wasn't until I had this one particular guy that I was speaking with, and I got to the end of this thing. I was like, listen, man, have you ever thought about trying to make a little bit of extra income? Happy Tuesday, Sales Ascender. I hope you're doing well today. Sean here, back at you with another high ticket tune up. I hope you had a great weekend and you are off to just a rocking month this month. And first and foremost, good morning and cheers. I'm drinking a little bit of coffee with some coconut oil in there. Makes it really good. But we have a really great high ticket tune up. I'm going to dive right into it. Let's see here. 1 second. I had a little bit of a tech difficulty. It looks like, okay, there we go. Now we're all set. Just make sure that we're live everywhere we need to be. Today's question coming from Logan. He says, Logan asks, what if somebody is being very defensive on a sales call? And while I love this question, it happens all the time. And the first time I ever experienced this personally, I remember I was actually selling multi-level marketing services. I was actually selling MLM stuff. And I just got into, of course, everybody's tried one or two or however many they are. Some people are probably still in MLM, and that's cool because the MLM model is a good model. There's a few things that are like snags, but at the end of the day, it is a good business model. That's why it's been around forever and ever and ever. And that's why so many big companies do it. Some of the biggest companies on earth, right? I've met a couple of the people like Al Williams, for example, who started Primerica. He's a billionaire. I got to have lunch with him and meet him, and it was pretty cool. But to answer this question, like depending on the part of the sales call that you're in, typically, again, we'll make it very easy. There's a beginning of a sales call, there's a middle of a sales call, and there's kind of an end of a sales call. So I'll kind of cover all three of those and give you some personal experience on how I've been able to tackle this one myself. So when I was selling MLM, the thing that I learned was more so I was actually working on trying to grow the business for myself, not just to sell the products. And at the time, it was an insurance-based product, and I was learned to sell the product. I got my license. I did all that other stuff, and then I realized that the secret was if I wanted to leverage and get into like business ownership versus just actually making sales and doing things like that, one of the things that I had to do was start to recruit and build a team. And while a lot of people shy away and got hesitant about this, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was new into the thing. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna learn how to do this. So because I'd already started to sell this insurance product pretty good. And then I was like, oh, I see, like the MLM thing, you need to build a team to get leverage and scale. And that's where people kind of get a little bit eerie and iffy. So I got into these conversations, and I remember that I would go in and I would first sell the product, and that would be fine. And then the secondary mission was always to recruit the person to see if they're interested in being part of the program. And so one of the things that I learned a lot was I wasn't getting so much of the defensiveness in the beginning of the call, or even sometimes in the middle of the call, which I'll go back to because that's more product based. But it was kind of where the end of the calls were happening, and I was getting into this recruiting part of things, and I would find that these people would just shell, like their whole like fortress would come in front of their face, and I was so confused about this for all the time. And I was like, hey, listen, are you trying to earn a little bit of extra income? And I would go down this path, and I would start asking these questions, and people would be like, I don't want any part of this, which is totally cool, respectable. And I never understood why they would get defensive. And then sometimes they would just like start throwing a wall at me. And it wasn't until I had this one particular guy that I was speaking with, and I got to the end of this thing. I was like, listen, man, have you ever thought about trying to make a little bit of extra income? And he came back at me saying, oh, man, I've tried all these MLM things. I was like, oh, I hadn't heard that one before. So I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, I tried this and it didn't work. And I tried this and it didn't work. And then I got in this other one and I got burned for all this money. And I was like, huh. And a light bulb popped over my head. And I realized at that moment that was the biggest thing that I was missing. I wasn't asking about past experiences. So that's my point in this story is why do people get defensive on a call? Most of the time, and I would say 95% of the time, the reason that this happens is because there's been some sort of either a past experience or something that's happened in that person's world previously that's caused them to raise their defense mechanism. That's typically one of the most biggest challenges that we do. Now, a couple of other reasons why people could get defensive on a call. First of all, they're not interested, right? You are pushing too hard, or you're throwing things at them, or maybe they've already got the solution sorted out. But then there's this other one of like, oh, I've been burned in the past. And so if you think about all these reasons why somebody could throw defenses at you, the secret really to handle all of this stuff is just literally to ask the questions like, and call it out, right? So what I say is, you've either found too much pain or they're just way too guarded because they've had some sort of a past experience that doesn't make a lot of sense. So, okay, let's go back to it. The beginning of the call, the middle of the call, and the end of the call. So in the beginning of the sales call, if somebody is guarded, the reason they're probably guarded and very defensive is because they don't have clairvoyance about what the call is going to be about. See, this is when I learned how to put the rules of the game into my sales calls. This actually helped me increase my close percentages by 33%. Pretty powerful number. And what I did was, in the beginning of the sales calls, I said, you know what, I'm just going to give it a quick agenda rundown of what happens during the sales call today. Hey, I created this analogy called game. It's like, hey, I'm grateful for you to be here today. I'm going to ask you a few questions. You got some for me. And at the end, we're going to decide one of two directions, right? And just by throwing something like that right into the beginning of the call, I found all these defenses just dropped. People are like, oh, okay, I could talk about that. That's no problem. And I was like, whoa, that happened in the beginning of the sales call. That's really powerful. And that thing really just literally led me to another 33% closes, because I didn't have to deal with the defense barriers and the mechanisms that people have in their head that are triggering them all the time. Because check it out, they've got their own story. It's not my job as a sales professional to be the hero in their story, right? There can only be one hero in every story. And if we're both heroes in the sales call, like, we're in two different stories. And that's the thing you have to remember. So what I did in the beginning of the sales call to drop the fences is I just threw a little agenda out of, here's what we're going to talk about today. It was very powerful, and it actually led to a pretty big increase in sales conversion. In the middle of the call, if we're in the middle of the call and all of a sudden you feel this weird tension and people's like start to rise, and if you're doing a good job asking questions into the world and a little more about going on in terms of getting the pain, right? Because there's really 5 different emotions that anyone can have when they buy something. Pain in the present, pain in the future, pleasure in the present, pleasure in the future, and then curiosity are the 5. What happens if somebody gets really defensive here, it's probably because you're almost too good of a questioner, and you got to a place where they're so hurtful right now about what you're talking about that they're just like, look, dude, you've hit me so hard, I can't even think about this anymore, and I'm done. That's only happened to me probably 3 times in my entire sales career, and it was when I was heavily and intensely focused on getting into a lot of pain with people, almost to the point of like psychologist style pain. I remember this one guy, we were just chatting in his office, and he literally said, you know what, Sean, like, you've asked these questions that are too close to home. I need you to leave. I can't talk with you anymore. And I was like, what happened? Well, the mechanism went up through the roof, and it was just like on video game, it was game over, and that's what happened. So in the middle of the call, you can get somebody that turns from rapport to defense, just simply because they are like hurting too much because you've asked too many great questions. Now, I would say, I'd be willing to bet and hedge this, that a lot of people will never get to there unless they're actually really focused on studying that part of the call. And then again, at the end of the sales call, when somebody could get defensive, the reason they get defensive at the end of a sales call could be for a number of reasons. Number one, they're like, yeah, whatever, I'm not interested. That could always be one, right? And if you get that defense, it's because you didn't do a good job on questioning. Number two, it's because they might not have the budget, and it's probably because you didn't even talk about the budget. Number three, it could be because there be some other source of help or influence on the decision. And if you haven't uncovered that during your conversation to figure out like who else is involved in making, buying process or decision process with that person, then literally they will say, hey, stop trying to push and close a deal on me. Like, I can't even make this decision. I have to go talk to so-and-so. There would be another defense mechanism that would come up. So literally, if this happens, what if somebody is being very defensive on a call? The secret to this is when you recognize it, call it out. Like, hey, I feel like feel like some defense walls came up or something right there. Like, can you just share a little bit more about that? And literally stop the call and go back to that exact piece where you felt it in the call. That's the secret. Because if you can go back and do that, then what happens is they'll be like, well, yeah, this. Oh, tell me more about that. How long has that been a problem? What have you tried to do to fix it? Did that work? How does that make you feel? How much does that cost? And you can go down some of these other questioning holes and you get to a place where they're like, no more defense. And so again, the main big secret here is if somebody gets very defensive, whether it be in the beginning, the middle, or the end, call it out and just say, hey, listen, like, it feels like you got really defensive here. I don't know kind of how to handle this. And when you stumble as a sales professional in that call, what's going to happen is those people will literally rescue you. It's a professional sales move. It's called the rescue. It's where you act like a dummy, even if you actually know the answer. And then you say something that would make them think like, oh, no, I got to rescue you. And as soon as they do that, you've regained the bond in the sales call and you could continue on your path. Like, that's how you recover and get back on the tracks and continue going through any sort of sales process. So with that said, that is how I deal with people who are defensive on the call. Again, you've either found a lot of pain or they're way too guarded for one reason or another. Your job is to simply call that out and then say, hey, that just whatever just happened, like there was this body language thing that I didn't get, like what just happened there? Yeah, and feel free to do that because people will be like, oh, well, I'm glad that you noticed. And they think immediately, here's the first thing they think. They're like, whoa, this guy's really perceptive, which is great, which means they can't get away with, like getting away with it. And so don't let your prospects get away with it. It's not cool. And just ask because they'll tell you, right? People are totally open, especially if you ask good questions. And that's really where it gets down to. So with that said, this one, I hope it added some value into your life. Don't forget to smash that like button. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure and subscribe and hit the notifications. Otherwise, I will speak with you tomorrow.